The glass doors of the shopping center slid open, and Tunde saw her across the crowded atrium, and every muscle in his body locked. She stood near the fountain with one hand resting on her swollen belly and the other holding a shopping bag. And her face had that same gentle concentration he remembered from when she used to read on their couch. But now someone else stood beside her. A man. Tall. Korean. His hand on the small of her back like it belonged there. Tunde's chest tightened. 6 months. She'd been gone 6 months, and here she was carrying what should have been their future, except it wasn't his, and the baby wasn't his, and the hand on her back definitely wasn't his. He moved before thinking. His feet carried him through the Saturday crowd past families and teenagers and couples shopping for things that didn't matter. His breath came short and angry. She'd left him, blocked his number, disappeared to another city without explanation, and now she was here pregnant and glowing and happy with someone else like he'd never existed. Nailah. Her head turned. Recognition flashed across her face, followed immediately by something that looked like fear. The man beside her straightened, his expression shifting from relaxed to alert in half a heartbeat. "Tunde," she said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." "Shouldn't be here?" His voice came out louder than intended. People nearby glanced over. "You're standing in a public mall in my city carrying someone else's baby 6 months after you left without a word, and I shouldn't be here? Please." Her voice stayed calm, but her hand moved protectively over her stomach. "Don't do this." "Don't do what? Ask questions? Demand answers?" He stepped closer. The man moved slightly in front of Nailah, not aggressive, just present. It made Tunde's blood boil hotter. "Who the hell is this? You moved on that fast?" "We're leaving," the man said. His English carried a slight accent, his tone measured. "Step back." "Step back?" Tunde laughed without humor. "You're telling me what to do, over a woman who was mine first?" "Was," Nailah said firmly. "Past tense, I left for a reason, Tunde, multiple reasons. Because I had money problems? Because I worked too much trying to fix them? That's why you ran to him?" He gestured sharply at the man. "Let me guess, he's rich, he's stable, he can give you things I couldn't." "It wasn't about money," her voice cracked slightly. "It was about how you made me feel. Small, controlled, afraid." "Afraid?" The word hit him like a slap. "I never hurt you." "Not physically." Her eyes met his, and he saw something in them he didn't recognize. Resolve. "But there are other ways to hurt someone, other ways to make them feel like they're disappearing." The man's hand touched her elbow gently. "Nailah, we should go." But Tunde wasn't done. The anger that had been building for 6 months, the humiliation of finding his apartment empty, his calls ignored, his messages unanswered, all of it surged up and out. "You don't get to walk away. You don't get to stand here pregnant and happy and act like I'm the villain." "I'm not acting like anything." Her voice stayed steady even as tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. "I'm stating facts. I left because staying was killing me. I'm happy now. I'm safe. And you need to let me go." "Let you go?" Something snapped. He reached for her arm, not to hurt, just to make her listen, to make her see, to make her stop looking at him like he was a stranger. "You don't just get to decide." His hand made contact with her shoulder, and in the motion of her pulling back and him pushing forward, she stumbled. The man caught her before she could fall, but the shopping bag dropped, and several people gasped, and suddenly there were hands on Tunde, mall security pulling him backward, voices shouting, and Nailah's face pale and shocked, and the man's expression transformed into something cold and calculating. "He pushed her," someone said. "He pushed a pregnant woman." "I didn't," Tunde tried to explain, but security had his arms now, guiding him away firmly. "I wasn't trying to—" "Nailah, tell them." But she said nothing, just stood there with one hand on her belly and the other in the man's grasp, watching him get escorted toward the security office while dozens of phones recorded the moment from every angle. In that frozen second before they turned the corner, Tunde saw the man lean down and whisper something in Nailah's ear. I saw her nod slightly, saw the man's eyes find him across the distance with a look that promised something Tunde couldn't yet understand. He had no idea that single push, that moment of anger and wounded pride, would systematically destroy everything he thought he'd built. That the man holding Nailah wasn't just stable or rich. That the life Tunde knew was already over and the countdown had just begun. If you're watching this, You've just witnessed the beginning of something that will challenge everything you think you know about consequences, love, and the invisible lines we cross without realizing. This is Afro-Korean Stories TV, where we explore the beautiful, complicated, sometimes devastating intersections of culture, identity, and human connection. If you believe love has no borders, but consequences definitely do, subscribe now. Drop a comment with your first reaction. Hit that like button because this story is about to take you somewhere you won't expect. Now let's go back. Let's go deeper. Let's find out how Tunde ended up in that mall and who exactly was standing beside Nailah when his world started to crumble. 12 months earlier, Tunde had believed in control. He'd believed that if he worked hard enough, planned carefully enough, demanded enough from himself and everyone around him, life would eventually align with his vision. He was 29, a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping company, pulling 70-hour weeks to climb a ladder that seemed to add rungs faster than he could ascend. His father had died young, overworked and underpaid, and Tunde had sworn he'd never repeat that pattern. He'd be successful, respected, financially secure before 35. Nailah had entered his life at a networking mixer he'd attended reluctantly. She was a graphic designer, Ghanaian-American, with a laugh that made him forget about his 5-year plan for approximately 30 seconds before his brain reasserted itself. She was talented but content with freelancing, happy to work from coffee shops in her small studio apartment, unbothered by the lack of traditional career trajectory. It drove him slightly crazy. It also fascinated him. Their first year together had felt like magic fighting against pragmatism. She'd pull him away from his laptop to watch sunsets. He'd cancel her spontaneous weekend trip ideas because he had reports due. She'd cook elaborate meals while he ate over spreadsheets. He'd criticize her spending on art supplies she didn't need. Slowly, the magic started losing. "You're squeezing too tight," she told him one night after he'd questioned why she'd bought expensive paper instead of saving for their theoretical future house. "I'm not a project manager, Tunde. I'm a person." "I'm trying to build something," he replied, exhausted and defensive. "For us, so we don't struggle." "We're already struggling," she'd said quietly. "Just not financially." He hadn't understood. Money problems were real. Emotional discomfort was temporary, manageable, something people worked through. He'd thought if he just kept pushing, kept building, kept planning, she'd eventually see his vision and appreciate the sacrifice. Instead, she'd started withdrawing, smiling less, spending more time at her studio, coming home later. He'd responded by tracking her location, by asking detailed questions about her day, by suggesting she should focus more on stable clients instead of passion projects. He'd thought he was being helpful, protective, in love. "I need space," she'd said after a particularly tense argument about her visiting her sister in Atlanta without consulting him first. "Space?" The word had felt like an accusation. "We live together. We're building a life. You don't just need space from that." "Maybe I need space from you." The words had hung between them like a blade. He'd apologized, promised to be better, bought flowers. I planned a date, tried to show her he could be different without actually changing anything fundamental. For a few weeks it seemed to work. Then one morning he'd woken up to an empty apartment, a note that said only, "I'm sorry, I can't," and all her belongings gone, except for a framed photo of them from their first trip together, left face down on the kitchen table. He'd called 50 times that first day, texted 100, driven to her sister's place only to find she wasn't there. Her friends wouldn't tell him anything. Her number got disconnected. It was like she'd evaporated, taking with her any chance for him to explain, to fix, to convince her she was making a mistake. The months after were a blur of anger and self-pity. He threw himself deeper into work, picked up extra projects, stayed at the office until midnight. Told himself he was better off, that she'd been holding him back, that she'd prove herself wrong when he became successful, and she realized what she'd lost. His co-workers started avoiding him. His boss suggested he take vacation. He ignored them all. Then came the rumors. A mutual acquaintance mentioned seeing Nailah in another city. Someone else said she looked happy, healthy, maybe seeing someone. Each piece of information was a needle under his skin. She'd left him and immediately found better. She'd moved on like their 3 years together meant nothing. The day he saw her in the mall, he'd been there buying a new laptop for work, trying to convince himself the purchase was an investment, not a comfort buy. And there she was, visibly pregnant, glowing in that way people describe expectant mothers, with a man who looked at her like she was precious. It felt like cosmic mockery. The universe rubbed his face in his failure. So he'd confronted her, and pushed her, and got arrested. The charges were assault. Misdemeanor, the lawyer said, likely probation and a fine since she hadn't actually fallen, wasn't injured, and there was no prior record. But that was before the video went viral. Someone had posted the mall footage, 30 seconds of him approaching, arguing, reaching out, her stumbling, people gasping. The comments were vicious. His face was clear. His name leaked. Within 48 hours, his LinkedIn was bombarded with messages calling him abusive, violent, dangerous. His boss called him into the office on Monday morning with an HR present and a severance package already prepared. "We can't have this associated with the company," his boss said, not unkindly but firmly. "It's a liability." "It was a misunderstanding," Tunde tried to explain. "I didn't mean to." "Intent doesn't matter when there's video evidence and public outcry. I'm sorry." He was escorted from the building with a box of his belongings and a notice that his final paycheck would be directly deposited. 3 years of 70-hour weeks of sacrificing everything for advancement erased in 3 minutes of poor judgment. He told himself it would blow over, that people would forget, that he'd find another job easily with his experience. But every application he submitted got rejected. Every interview got mysteriously canceled. His name, when Googled, brought up the video first, the assault charge second, and his professional profile a distant third. His savings started draining. Rent was due. His car payment was due. His credit card balances climbed. He applied for unemployment, but the process was slow. He reached out to contacts in his industry, but suddenly no one was returning calls. It felt like the entire professional world had blacklisted him. Then, stranger things started happening. His bank account froze. When he called, they said there was suspicious activity and they needed to verify his identity, which required documents he couldn't immediately provide, and the process would take 2 weeks. His credit cards declined, even though he knew he had an available balance. The customer service lines kept disconnecting or putting him on eternal hold. His landlord called saying there were complaints about noise from his unit, even though he'd been home alone, quiet, barely leaving his couch. Then she said the building owners were doing renovations and he'd need to vacate by the end of the month. When he protested, when he cited his lease, she became apologetic but firm. "I don't make the rules. You'll get your security deposit back." His phone started acting strange, calls dropping, messages not sending. A feeling, impossible to prove, that someone was listening. He tried to brush it off as paranoia, as stress from unemployment and public humiliation manifesting in conspiracy thinking. But then he'd catch glimpses of the same car parked on his street at different times, or see a man in a coffee shop who seemed to be watching him, who left immediately when Tunde made eye contact. Small things, easily dismissed individually, terrifying when accumulated. "You're losing it," he told himself while packing his apartment, having found a cheaper place across town that would take him without a credit check if he paid 3 months up front. "There's no conspiracy. You screwed up and you're paying for it. That's all." But deep in his gut, under the self-recrimination and the anger and the shame, something whispered that this was too coordinated, too comprehensive, too perfectly timed to be coincidence. We're halfway through this story and I need to pause for just a moment, because if you're feeling that tension building, if you're questioning what's really happening behind the scenes, then you understand why Afro-Korean Stories TV exists. We tell the stories that make you think, that make you feel, that explore the gray areas between right and wrong, love and control, consequence and revenge. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Comment below with your theories about what's happening to Tunde. Is it karma? Is it something more calculated? Hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear a story about the invisible cost of our choices. Now, let's find out exactly who Nailah's new man is and why Tunde should have walked away when he had the chance. The new apartment was smaller, darker, in a neighborhood where sirens were a nightly lullaby. Tunde had exactly $700 left after paying the upfront rent, and his job search remained fruitless. He'd applied for positions below his experience level, warehouse work, delivery driving, retail management, and still got nothing. It was like his name triggered an automatic rejection. He spent his days on free Wi-Fi at the library, researching, trying to understand what was happening. That's when he started digging into Nailah's new life. Her social media was private, but he found her through tagged photos from friends. She'd moved to a different state and was back visiting. The man from the mall appeared in a few pictures. His name was Min-Jun Park. Tunde Googled him. The results made his stomach drop. Min-Jun Park wasn't just stable or successful. He was connected. His family owned a chain of high-end Korean restaurants across the East Coast. But that was the legitimate side. The deeper Tunde dug, reading between the lines of business articles and forum speculation, the more he found suggestions of other ventures. Import-export businesses with vague descriptions, real estate acquisitions that happened too quickly, associations with names that appeared in organized crime databases. One article, from a small investigative journalism site, directly referenced the Park family's alleged ties to Korean organized crime networks operating in the U.S. It mentioned money laundering, protection rackets, and political influence. The article was 3 years old, and the site appeared defunct, but it was enough to make Tunde's hands shake as he read. He'd pushed the girlfriend, apparently now fiancée based on the ring visible in recent photos, of a man with potential ties to organized crime. On camera. In public. "Oh God," he whispered in the empty library. Several people looked up. He closed his laptop and sat back, trying to breathe through the panic. This explained everything. The systematic dismantling of his life wasn't random bad luck or karmic justice. It was deliberate, organized, professional. Min-Jun had seen the video, had decided Tunde needed to be taught a lesson, and was using resources Tunde couldn't even comprehend to erase him from normal society. For a moment, Tunde felt a surge of self-righteous anger. This proved he was the victim, that Nailah had chosen a dangerous man, that Tunde's concerns about her judgment had been valid all along. But then a quieter voice, one he'd been suppressing for months, pointed out that regardless of who Min-Jun was, Tunde had still pushed a pregnant woman in public, that his anger and entitlement had created this situation, that Min-Jun was reacting to Tunde's action, not the other way around. He pushed the thought away. Survival first. Moral inventory later. He needed money. He needed to disappear. Maybe leave the state entirely, start over somewhere with a new name. But that required resources he didn't have. He'd have to ask for help, which meant swallowing pride he'd spent his entire adult life building. He called his mother. "Tunde," she said, and her voice carried that mix of worry and disappointment he'd been hearing since he was a child making poor choices. "I saw the video. Are you okay?" "I need money," he said, skipping pleasantries. "I need to leave town for a while." "Leave town?" "Baby, you need to face what you did. You need to apologize, get counseling, make things right." "You don't understand," he said urgently. "It's not about the video anymore. I can't explain, but I'm in danger." "Danger?" Her skepticism was audible. "Tunde, you're not in danger. You're in consequence. There's a difference." "Mama, please." He hated the begging tone in his voice. "I need $5,000 just to get settled somewhere else." "I don't have $5,000, she said flatly. "And if I did, I wouldn't give it to you for running away. Come home, stay with me, find a local job, do the work to rebuild properly." "I can't." "You mean you won't?" They argued for 10 more minutes before he hung up, angry and more alone than before. His siblings were no better. His friends had already distanced themselves. He was truly isolated. That night, someone broke into his apartment. He woke to the sound of the door opening, to footsteps in his living room. He grabbed his phone and the knife he'd started keeping under his pillow and crept to the bedroom doorway. 2 men stood in his living room. They didn't wear masks. They didn't seem concerned about being identified. One was Korean, one was black, both dressed in dark clothes that looked expensive. "Tunde," the Korean man said calmly, "we're here to deliver a message." "Get out," Tunde said, his voice shaking. "I'll call the police." "No, you won't." The black man smiled without warmth. "Because then you'd have to explain why you've been cyberstalking Nailah Park. Why have you been researching her husband? Why are you planning to run instead of accepting your punishment?" "Punishment?" Tunde's grip on the knife tightened. "For what?" "I already lost my job. I'm broke. What more do you want?" "Understanding," the Korean man said. "You touched your family. In our world, that has consequences." "Your world? I didn't even know who he was." Ignorance isn't protection. The man took a step closer. Tunde raised the knife. The man didn't flinch. You put your hands on a pregnant woman. You showed violence where there should have been respect. Whether you knew who she belonged to or not is irrelevant. She doesn't belong to anyone, Tunde said, even though his hands were shaking. She's a person, not property. Interesting time to develop feminist principles, the black man said. Considering you treated her like property when you were together, tracked her, controlled her, made her feel like she was suffocating. She told you that? She didn't have to. We read the messages you sent after she left, dozens of them, all variations of, you belong to me, come back, you're making a mistake. You want to talk about ownership? Tunde had no response. The knife felt absurd in his hand, a child's toy against the certainty radiating from these men. Here's what happens now, the Korean man continued. You're going to stay in this city. You're going to accept whatever work you can find. You're going to stay away from Nailah, from Min-Jun, from anyone connected to them. You're going to live with the consequences of your actions like a man instead of a coward running away. And if I don't, then things get worse. The man's smile was gentle and terrifying. Much worse. We can make you disappear in ways that don't involve violence, make you wish you only had to worry about a criminal record and unemployment. They left as quietly as they'd entered. Tunde stood frozen in his bedroom doorway for 20 minutes before his legs would hold him enough to check that they were really gone. They'd left his door unlocked. His windows were unbroken, like ghosts passing through walls. He didn't sleep that night, just sat on his couch with the knife in his lap and the lights on, watching the door, waiting for them to come back. Over the following weeks, Tunde did exactly as instructed. He found work washing dishes at a diner, $12 an hour, cash under the table, no questions asked. The owner was an older Korean woman who looked at him with something like pity when he came in desperate and willing to take anything. She worked him hard but fairly, fed him 1 meal per shift, paid him at the end of each week. He scrubbed plates and listened to the kitchen staff chat in Korean and Spanish and English, invisible in his station, thinking about how far he'd fallen and how much further he could still go. The public shame had faded as the video aged beyond viral relevance, but the personal consequences remained. He was living day to day, paycheck to paycheck, in a cramped apartment that smelled like mildew, eating ramen and day-old bread, wearing the same 3 outfits on rotation. At night, he'd lie on his mattress on the floor and think about Nailah. Not with anger anymore. That had burned out, replaced by something closer to grief. He'd loved her, poorly, possessively, without understanding what love actually required. He'd thought love meant planning a future, managing variables, making sure nothing went wrong. He'd never considered that love might mean letting go, trusting, making space for someone to exist outside his control. She'd tried to tell him. I'm disappearing, she'd said once during an argument. Every day with you I feel less like myself and more like a supporting character in your story. He'd dismissed it as dramatic. Now he understood. 2 months into his dishwashing job, the owner's daughter came to visit the restaurant. She was young, early 20s, studying at a nearby university. Her mother introduced them briefly, and Tunde nodded politely and went back to scrubbing. But the daughter kept glancing at him throughout her visit, and finally approached while he was taking his break in the alley. I know who you are, she said. No accusation, just statement. Tunde's stomach clenched. Okay. My mother doesn't. She doesn't use social media much, but I saw the video. I recognized you when you came in asking for work. Are you going to tell her? The young woman was quiet for a moment, studying him. What you did was wrong. I know. Do you? She leaned against the alley wall. Or do you just know you got caught? It was a good question, one he'd been asking himself in the dark hours before sleep. Both, he said finally. I knew it was wrong in the moment. I did it anyway because I was angry and hurt, and I wanted her to feel what I was feeling. And then I got caught and everything fell apart, and I've spent every day since trying to figure out how I became someone who would push a pregnant woman in public. That's more honest than I expected. Doesn't make it better. No, she agreed. It doesn't. But it's a start. She pushed off from the wall. I won't tell my mother. But if I hear you've bothered that woman again, if I see your name in the news for anything similar, I will make sure you never work anywhere in this city again. Understood? Understood. She left him in the alley, smoking a cigarette he'd bummed from one of the line cooks, thinking about second chances and whether he deserved one. That's when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Tunde. Min-Jun's voice was unmistakable, calm, controlled, certain. I need to see you. Why? Tunde's hand tightened on the phone. Your guys already delivered their message. This is different. This is a conversation, not a warning. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., I'll text you the address. And if I don't come? Then you're stupider than I thought. Min-Jun hung up. The text came through seconds later. An address for a restaurant in the financial district, one of the Park family establishments, Tunde realized when he Googled it. Expensive, exclusive. The kind of place Tunde used to fantasize about affording once he made partner or VP or whatever career milestone he'd been chasing. He had 24 hours to decide if he was walking into a trap or an opportunity. 24 hours to wonder if this was the moment everything ended or the moment he finally got answers. He showed up at 7:55, wearing his cleanest shirt and least worn jeans, feeling underdressed and outclassed before he even entered. The hostess smiled politely, checked her list, and led him through the main dining room to a private area in the back. A single table, 2 settings. And Min-Jun, sitting with perfect posture, wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than Tunde made in 6 months, looking at him with eyes that revealed nothing. Sit, Min-Jun said. It wasn't a request. Tunde sat. A waiter appeared, poured water, disappeared. The silence stretched. Tunde forced himself not to fill it, not to ask questions, not to show weakness. Finally, Min-Jun spoke. Nailah asked me to stop. Of all the opening lines Tunde had imagined, this wasn't one. Stop what? Dismantling you. She saw what was happening, put it together, asked me to leave you alone. So this is, what, a goodbye speech? It's an explanation. Min-Jun's fingers traced the rim of his water glass. You need to understand what you did, not the push, not the public scene, the 3 years before that. I know I wasn't perfect. You broke her. Min-Jun interrupted. His voice stayed level, but something hard entered his eyes. Systematically. Slowly. You took a woman who was confident and creative and full of light, and you dimmed her until she couldn't recognize herself. You called it love. You called it building a future. She called it suffocation. She never said... She said it constantly. You didn't listen. You heard her words and translated them into problems you needed to solve, obstacles you needed to manage. You never once just listened to what she was telling you about her experience of being with you. Tunde wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but sitting across from the man who'd won Nailah's heart by apparently doing everything Tunde hadn't, the words died in his throat. I met her 4 months after she left you, Min-Jun continued. She was working in a coffee shop, freelancing, trying to rebuild. She was terrified of dating, terrified of men, terrified she'd end up in another relationship where she disappeared piece by piece. Do you understand what you did to her trust? I never hit her. Physical violence isn't the only way to hurt someone. You know that now, don't you? You've spent the last months experiencing how much damage can be done without ever throwing a punch. It was true. Every systematic dismantling of Tunde's life had happened without violence, without physical confrontation, just pressure, just consequences, just the slow realization that he was powerless against forces he couldn't fight. Why are you telling me this? Tunde asked. What do you want from me? Nothing. Min-Jun leaned back. I already got what I wanted. You experienced fear, helplessness, the feeling of your life being controlled by someone else who doesn't care about your feelings or your future. You experienced a fraction of what you put Nailah through. So we're done? You're letting me go? Nailah is letting you go. I would have kept going. But she has a kind heart, kinder than you deserve. She said everyone deserves a chance to change, to learn, to become better. I disagree, but I love her, so I honor her wishes. The waiter reappeared with food neither of them had ordered, beautifully plated dishes that Tunde didn't recognize. The waiter poured wine. Min-Jun took a sip. Tunde's glass stayed full. Eat, Min-Jun said. This meal costs more than your rent. Don't waste it. Tunde picked up his fork but couldn't bring himself to taste anything. His stomach was tight. His throat was closed. Can I ask you something? Tunde said finally. You can ask. Do you Do you love her? Actually love her? Or is this just, he gestured vaguely, possession? Protecting what's yours? Min-Jun's expression shifted slightly, something almost like amusement. You think I'm like you? Aren't you? You tracked me down, destroyed my life, sent men to my apartment. That's control. That's consequence, Min-Jun corrected. You hurt someone I love, I responded. But I don't track Nailah. I don't monitor her phone. I don't question her decisions or tell her how to spend her time. I trust her. I support her. I create space for her to be fully herself. That's the difference between love and possession. She's pregnant with your baby. You're getting married. You think there's no possession in that? She chose both. She asked me to marry her, actually. Proposed last Christmas because she said she'd spent too many years waiting for men to decide her future, and she wanted to be the one making that choice. The baby was planned, together, after months of discussion, because that's what partners do. They discuss. They choose together. Tunde felt something crack inside his chest. It wasn't jealousy anymore. It was recognition. He'd never treated Nailah as a partner. He'd treated her as a project, a variable in his equation, a piece of his plan. Even when he'd thought he was loving her, he'd been managing her. I'm sorry, Tunde said. The words came out rough. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry for what I did to her, for pushing her in the mall, for the 3 years before that, for not listening when she tried to tell me, for being so caught up in my own fear of failure that I made her feel like she was failing me just by being herself. Min-Jun watched him for a long moment. Don't apologize to me. You'll never get the chance to apologize to her. I made sure of that. But you can apologize to yourself for wasting years of your life trying to control things you should have been appreciating, for becoming someone you probably didn't want to be. The meal continued in near silence. Tunde managed a few bites. The food was exquisite and tasted like ash. When the plates were cleared and the bill was paid by Min-Jun without even glancing at it, they stood to leave. At the door, Min-Jun stopped. The restrictions are lifted. Your bank accounts will be unfrozen by morning. Your credit will be restored. You can leave the city if you want, get a new job, start over. But understand this, if you ever contact Nailah again, if you come near her or her family, if you even speak her name in public, everything we did to you these last months will look like mercy. Are we clear? Clear. Good. Min-Jun extended his hand. Tunde stared at it for a moment before shaking. The grip was firm but not aggressive. Just a hand. Just a man. Just someone who loved someone and protected them. I hope you become someone better than you were, for your own sake. Then he left, walking out into the night, getting into a car that waited at the curb, disappearing with the finality of a door closing on a chapter of Tunde's life that was finally, mercifully over. This is the moment where everything shifts, where consequences become lessons, where pain transforms into growth if we let it. If you're still with me, if you felt every moment of this story, then you understand what Afro-Korean Stories TV is really about. We're not here to tell you simple stories with easy answers. We're here to explore the complicated truth of being human, of loving across cultures and borders, of making mistakes and learning to live with them. Subscribe if you believe in stories that challenge you. Comment with your honest reaction to this ending, like if you think Tunde deserved another chance or if Min-Jun should have kept going. Share this with someone who needs to understand that love isn't control, it's space, it's trust, it's choosing someone every day and letting them choose you back. Now let's see what happened next. 6 months after the dinner with Min-Jun, Tunde had moved to a different city, not running this time, choosing. He'd found work as a logistics coordinator again, though at a smaller company with less prestige and lower pay. It was enough. He'd found a therapist who specialized in anger management and control issues and patterns of behavior that pushed people away. The sessions were painful. Every week he had to confront another way he'd hurt Nailah, another moment where he'd chosen his fear over her happiness, another pattern he'd inherited from his father's anxiety about providing that he'd turned into weapons against the woman he claimed to love. You were trying to prevent your father's fate, his therapist said during one session, working yourself to death, never having enough. But you went so far in the opposite direction that you sacrificed everything else, including your humanity. I didn't mean to hurt her, Tunde said for the 100th time. Intent doesn't erase impact, the therapist replied. Also for the 100th time. You need to hold both truths. You didn't intend harm and you caused it anyway. Both are true. Both matter. He started attending a men's group that met every Thursday night, a circle of guys who'd all hurt people they loved and were trying to figure out how to be better. Some were court-ordered. Some came voluntarily. Tunde fell somewhere in between, not legally required, but morally obligated by his own recognition that he'd become someone he didn't want to be. He heard stories that mirrored his own. Men who'd tracked girlfriends' phones, men who'd made financial decisions without consulting partners, men who'd seen emotional needs as weakness and practical concerns as strength, men who'd loved poorly and called it protection. I used to think I was keeping her safe, one man shared, questioning where she was, who she was with. I thought I was being a good boyfriend. Turns out I was just being controlling. Tunde recognized himself in every story. It was humbling and horrifying and necessary. He started dating again, cautiously. A woman from his office building who worked in accounting. Her name was Simone, and she was cautious too, divorced, with a history of choosing men who needed fixing. Their first few dates were careful conversations where they both laid out their histories, their patterns, their fears. I need you to know, Tunde said on their third date, that I pushed my ex-girlfriend in public while she was pregnant. It's on video. If you Google my name, you'll probably find it. Simone was quiet for a moment. Did you mean to hurt her? I meant to make her listen to me. I meant to force a conversation she didn't want to have. Whether I meant to hurt her or not, I did. Have you done work on why? I'm in therapy. Been going for 6 months. I have a long way to go, but I'm trying. Trying is important. She reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. My ex used to hit me. When I finally left, he said he'd change. He never did the work. Never went to therapy. Just kept promising and failing. The fact that you're actually doing the work matters. They dated slowly, carefully, with boundaries clearly discussed. She told him when he was getting too intense about planning their future. He told her when he was feeling insecure and needed reassurance instead of space. They both made mistakes. They both apologized. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that felt revolutionary to Tunde. One evening, 8 months after the dinner with Min-Jun, Tunde was scrolling through social media when he saw an announcement. Nailah had given birth, a healthy baby girl. The photo showed her in a hospital bed, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundled person while Min-Jun stood beside her with a look of wonder on his usually controlled face. The caption was simple. She's here. She's perfect. We're complete. Tunde stared at the photo for a long time. He felt grief for what he'd lost. Grief for the future he'd imagined that would never exist. But underneath the grief was something else, something lighter. Relief, maybe. Or acceptance. She was happy. She was safe. She'd built the life she wanted with someone who knew how to love her properly. And that was okay. That was good even. He didn't comment. I didn't like it. Didn't reach out. Just closed the app. And sat with the feelings until they settled into something manageable. You look sad, Simone said when he met her later for dinner. My ex had her baby, he said. I saw the announcement. How do you feel? He considered. Sad, but also happy for her. Is that weird? It's growth, Simone said. Being able to hold both feelings at once, being happy for someone's joy even when it reminds you of your loss. That night, lying in bed, Tunde thought about the mall. About the moment his hand pushed and Nailah stumbled and everything changed. He'd spent months being angry about it, feeling victimized by the consequences, convinced the punishment exceeded the crime. Now he understood that the punishment had never been about the push. It had been about the 3 years of smaller pushes, the daily erosion of her autonomy, the 1,000 tiny ways he'd made her smaller so he could feel bigger. The physical push in the mall had just been the visible manifestation of the invisible violence he'd been committing for years. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Nailah. Min-Jun gave me permission to send this. I just want you to know that I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I hope you've become someone better. I hope you've learned what I couldn't teach you. I hope you never make another woman feel the way you made me feel. I'm blocking this number after I send this. Don't try to respond. Just be better, for your own sake. The The message sat on his screen like a benediction. He read it 3 times, felt tears on his face, felt the weight of the last year, the last months, the last weeks of work and growth and painful self-examination. She was right. He had changed. Not enough. Maybe never enough to undo what he'd done, but changed. He typed a response knowing she'd never see it. "I'm trying. Thank you for the chance." Then he deleted it. Because this wasn't about him anymore. This was about her getting to close the door, her getting to have the last word, her getting to move on completely while he carried the lesson forward. He thought about the baby. A little girl who would grow up with a father who knew how to love her mother properly, who would learn what healthy love looked like, who would never accept less than she deserved because she'd seen the model of partnership her parents built. That baby would never know Tunde existed, would never know her mother had escaped a relationship that was killing her quietly. And that was right. That was how it should be. 3 years later, Tunde married Simone in a small ceremony with close friends and family. He'd been promoted at work, not because he was working 70-hour weeks, but because he'd learned to be efficient, to delegate, to trust his team. His therapist attended the wedding and hugged him after the ceremony, telling him how far he'd come. His men's group sent a card signed by everyone, congratulating him and reminding him that the work never ended. On his wedding night, dancing slowly with his wife, he thought about Nailah one last time. Thought about the girl in the coffee shop he'd met at a networking mixer, the woman who'd tried to teach him that love required space and trust and letting go. He sent a silent thank you into the universe, knowing she'd never receive it, knowing that was okay. "What are you thinking?" Simone asked, her head on his shoulder. "That I'm grateful," Tunde said, "for second chances, for people who see who we're becoming instead of who we were, for the hard lessons that break us open so something better can grow." "That's very poetic for someone who used to think emotions were inefficient," she teased gently. He laughed. "I contain multitudes. I just didn't know it yet." They danced until the song ended, until their guests pulled them into conversations and toasts, until the night faded into memory. And somewhere, in another city, in another life, a woman he used to love was putting her daughter to bed while her husband cleaned up dinner dishes, living the peaceful existence she'd fought so hard to claim. The mall incident had exposed his biggest mistake, not the push, the years of small violences that preceded it. But it had also given him the chance to confront himself, to break down the person he'd been, to rebuild something better from the wreckage. The consequence had been devastating. The lesson had been necessary. And the man standing at his wedding, dancing with his wife, thanking the universe for another chance to love properly, bore almost no resemblance to the man who'd pushed a pregnant woman in anger and thought he was the victim. That was the real story, not the viral video or the revenge or the dramatic confrontation, just the slow, painful, necessary transformation of a man who'd hurt someone and chose to learn from it instead of repeating the pattern. It wasn't redemption. Redemption required forgiveness from the person harmed, and Nailah owed him nothing. But it was growing. And growth, Tunde had learned, was something you did for yourself and everyone you'd hurt in the future, not for absolution from the past. If you made it to this final moment, if you stayed through every revelation and consequence and painful truth, then you understand what Afro-Korean Stories TV is really trying to do. We're exploring what happens when love collides with culture, when consequence meets growth, when mistakes become lessons if we're brave enough to learn them. This channel exists for the complicated stories, the difficult truths, the moments that make us question our own patterns and choices. Subscribe because there are more stories coming that will challenge you, move you, make you think differently about love and accountability and change. Comment your final thoughts on Tunde's journey. Did he deserve his second chance? Like this video if you believe people can change or if you believe they can't. Share it with someone who needs to understand that the biggest mistake isn't failing once, it's refusing to learn from the failure. And remember, love isn't control, it's space, it's trust, it's choosing someone every day and letting them choose you back. Until the next story, keep loving across all borders, including the borders of your own limitations.